Hear me? I can't hear you. Say something. Stream and we'll start up here. I just got to hit a couple buttons. All right, Emil Kadlec here with Football Diehards and Drop Till You Drop with Jen Ryan. How you doing, Jen?
Behind Sunday, because of course this is when all of the props are out, and I can really spend a good portion of my day kind of poring over them and trying to figure out where I'm going to win the money tomorrow.
Woohoo! Now, last year you said you did, or last week you said you did quite well.
I did do well last week. The beginning of the season, the lines are a little soft, as we say, just because they're not operating off of current data. But I think it's also very important to remember that you do the research, you look into everything, but there's still luck involved. Anyone who says like I'm a prop betting expert, don't listen to them. You just trust your process and hope for good results. And I just happened to have good results last week.
Well, good. Well, it's going to be interesting to see what's going on this week. Now, as we talked before, on the website, we do have projections that's buried in the cheat sheet. So if you go to the weekly rankings and you go to the staff cheat sheet and you look, it's kind of hard to find. I guess we need to make it a little easier where it says download CVS. We've got every player broken down, at least, except for rookies yet. We don't have the rookie data. We're waiting for another week to kind of get the rookie data stabilized because each player has their own characteristics. Of course, Joe Burrow is going to be throwing 61 passes a game. There's your statistic there.
Of course.
That was crazy.
I know. I couldn't believe it when they said it. I thought the poor kid's arm might fall off. But yeah, the best thing about this download to CSV is it saves. You could just go ahead and throw a filter in right in Excel, and it allows you to sort highest to lowest. So if you want to see who we like to have the most passing yards, the most rushing yards, just filter that out. And then, of course, you're going to use that for your fantasy lines, but you're going to want to use that for prop bets too. It's always, what a prop line is in a way, it's a bookmaker's projection for the player that week. So it's always nice to kind of look at fantasy projections versus the book's projections and kind of see where you land, where they land, and that's how you find a line that you like that you think you can beat.
Oh, fantastic. So where would you like to start?
Well, I think I would like to kind of go over just a few of the things that I'm already looking at this week. And this will change, and there'll be more throughout the night. And if I win some money on UFC tonight, there'll be more tomorrow morning. So, I'll definitely be all over Twitter tomorrow too, talking about some of these props. But again, I love the fantasy aspect of it because it kind of gives you a sense of, these bookmakers are sharp. They make a lot of money for a reason, and it gives them an idea. Like they're very good at sort of like setting a line. So, like, perfect example, we saw Clyde Edwards-Helaire blow up last week, and this week they have his rushing yards at 70 and a half. I like that a lot. I think that's a pretty good line to work with. And, if we go ahead and check our projections, let's see what we have. We don't have rookies on here yet. Never mind. But we saw what he did last week. He's Andy Reid's RB1. It's just such a valuable role. That team throws the ball a ton, but they clearly run it a lot too. And 70 and a half, for me, it just feels low, especially given what he did last week. So that's an example of a line that I saw that jumped out to me that I said, I don't think they have this right. And that's money I'll be putting the over on this weekend. So that's an example of some of the things I look for. I also think an example of maybe some overreaction by the book is Tyreek Hill. They have him at 62 and a half receiving yards. We saw last week Sammy Watkins did his typical Sammy Watkins, where he comes out week one and just absolutely explodes. And, then he kind of sort of disappears. Now, it's a tight line. Our projections, we have Tyreek Hill at 71 yards. book has him at 62.5. So if we trust our projections and if we trust all the expert projections, it looks like the book got it wrong here. They're a little low on him. And really, Tyreek Hill with his yards after the catch and the way he could kind of take a slant and just fly. I mean, 62.5 yards, that could be one play. So that's another line I'm looking to exploit. It's just, you see it and you're like, man, I think you got it wrong there. And you bet, you gamble, you take a shot on it.
Well, and he's a fun one because he can get one catch for, he's got a high ceiling and not necessarily a low floor, but obviously he can go crazy with his run after the catch.
And that's the fun of it. I mean, he can get that in the first half, and the Chiefs are favored by 8.5 points, right? So the only thing that could really sort of quell those chances are if the game gets out of hand and then we're just rushing the ball, right? Mm-hmm. Which is why I like the Edwards rushing line too. I think it's super sharp to kind of bet both of them, bet Tyreek's yards and bet the rookie's rushing yards, because either way the game goes, you might hit one or both. But with a low line like that on a player that you really, the game script and the situation where you really think he can hit it, it's so fun to watch. I mean, that was Nick Chubb on Thursday night. Nick Chubb on Thursday night, his rushing yard his prop was 69.5 yards. And I think by halftime he had like 52. So now you're waiting for the third quarter. You're just waiting for that line to hit. Then it hits, and you're like, okay, no negative yardage, and let's finish the game. So it's I like those bets where I'm not necessarily hopefully sweating it in the fourth quarter. I try to look for something that maybe it's going to hit early, just so I can start playing for the 4:00 games and the night game and all that other stuff. Eckler's receptions. I feel like we kind of have to talk about Eckler's receptions. He had one target last week, and on his worst week in 2019, he had 3 targets. But he's more of like a 5, 6, 7 target guy. I think they've probably heard this noise. I'm sure they heard some of the criticisms. How did Eckler get 1 target? And the book is accounting for this. They have his reception line at 4.5. I firmly believe the squeaky wheel gets the grease. We saw this with Odell Beckham on Thursday too. His lack of usage week 1. Baker over-targeted him, and he had a good night on Thursday. I just suspect we're going to see a lot of passing to Eckler this week to sort of quiet the criticism. 4.5 is tight. It's tough, but I like it. They're going to be playing from behind. And I think there's, like I said, going to be a concerted effort to run him a couple more wide receiver routes, get him a couple more underneath. And I would actually like to go check our projections now because I am so curious.
Yeah, ironically, we have him at 4 catches for 43 yards and 0.3 touchdowns.
So he just needs one more than those 4 yards, those 4 catches. He just needs one more.
What do you think? Why did they just throw the ball to him one time last week? Was it the new quarterback? I mean, is this a trend? Boy, that's a hell of a trend because he caught a lot of balls last year.
If you go back and you look at Tyrod, he just doesn't target running backs like Phillip Rivers does. And if you go back and you watch that Colts game from last week, you see that's sort of what Rivers does. I mean, he targets his running backs. But again, that's not the offense. So I would have to think during the week this week that they've kind of going back to that, working on, the whole allure with Eckler, the whole reason why we drafted him in the first, second round is because he's this dual threat back. Granted, I don't think the head coach really cares about our fantasy teams, but you have to believe that he knows that this guy is such a weapon in the passing game. And for me, if I'm the coach of that team, 1 target is just unacceptable. So I hope you're listening, and let's throw Eckler the ball. Listen to Coach Jen.
Certainly, that makes sense. I mean, obviously they want to get that guy the ball. Is he going to get 4.5 this week? I mean, do you want to go over and under on that right now? That's a good question. And some of these projections that we're doing correlate to statistics that he did last year, not the one game he did this year. So, yeah, that's a good one. So which way are you going to go there? Did you decide yet?
Over. Oh yeah, over. I think, like I said, I think they're going to overdo it. I think they're going to overcompensate a little bit this week, and just especially early, get them involved early, get them in a groove, and just over target them. I like them for a couple catches this week, and I do. Again, it's a good line. I mean, you look at our projections of 4, and they have them at 4.5. It's close. You know, we're all like fantasy and the book are all on the same page in terms with that line, at least with what their data and research tell them. So it's not an inefficient line to exploit. I didn't look at it and say, oh my God, the book got it wrong. I saw that line and I think to myself, they agree too that last week was the outlier. We're not going to see Austin Eckler get 1 target a week going forward. That's the line. Yeah, it's a fun one, you know. Another one I'm looking at, Ryan Fitzpatrick. They have him for a touchdown and a half. So really 2 touchdowns, right? He'd have to throw 2 touchdowns to hit that line. And that's at plus 145, which means the book isn't expecting it. They're not expecting really, I mean, it's not a huge dog line, but it's still a dog line. They're not really expecting him to throw for 2 touchdowns. I find that to be a somewhat inefficient line. I am expecting him to throw for at least 2 touchdowns. It's a common opponent. He knows the Bills from the days he played with the Jets. And the thing about Ryan Fitzpatrick, which is, it's tough for fantasy because it obviously leaves you open for interceptions, but he is just fearless with throwing the ball. He is not afraid to throw the ball. He's not afraid to throw it downfield. He's not afraid to take shots. He's just, we call him like the YOLO ball. Like he's not afraid to throw the YOLO ball. And it just takes 2. And, that's something I always like to look at a low touchdown total for a quarterback because if they come out and score on the first drive, you're halfway there, right? Gotcha. And again, now I'm curious, of course, what we have Fitzpatrick for
we've
here.
We've got him ranked fairly low in the quarterback, so he's not going to have that number. And again, that's the problem with the statistics is when you put together a ranking of 32 quarterbacks, somebody's got to be 32 or 31 or 30, and you're dealing with all these players. You can't say I'm going to put, the bot. I can't put 20 players in the top 10. So you're going to get that on those projections. So you have to decide if you think he's going to actually have a game where he's a top 15 quarterback. And then he's going to get you that number. And also you can look at last year's predictions, which I don't have up on there right now, but that helps too to see how he did in the past. So you're not going to see that on those projections on some of players like him because he's going to be ranked low.
Yeah, and especially until we get 4 or 5 weeks, we have to rely on last year's data. That's sort of all. It's just part of what we have to do here. And I'm pulling up Fitzpatrick from last year. We're looking for a multi-touchdown game, right? That's going to be the 2 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so he only had multi-touchdown games in 6 games last year. So yeah, that's why it's an underdog line, and that's why we have him ranked where we do because the data tells us that. So this is one of those things where kind of try to take other things into consideration. So something else I'm looking at is, the Dolphins are 5.5-point home underdogs. They have to throw, but they're going to be trailing. That's what that line indicates, that they are going to be trailing in this game. So there's going to be a lot of throwing. And what's interesting is I always like to look at how much of the money is going on a bet versus what kind of person is placing a bet, which is what they call the sharp money, right? So we've got 88% of the money and 77% of the bets are on the Bills right now. But the sharp action, that's the professional bettors, like people who are actually bet for a living, and their bets actually will swing lines in certain directions. The sharp money is coming in on the Dolphins to cover. So that, sort of indicates to me then, all right, if the guys who do this for a living, really like the Dolphins to cover the line, which moved, by the way, opened at 3.5, and now it's at 5.5.
Oh.
Again, it just indicates throwing, and if he is going to be throwing the ball, I really like his chances of throwing for 2 touchdowns.
And last year in Week 17 against Buffalo, at Buffalo, he threw for 320 yards and had 1 touchdown passing.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
so it's
1 rushing touchdown. So he actually had 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing and 1 passing. But that's a lot of yardage.
this prop. This is where the props really get you too, though. This isn't rushing or receiving. This is all just a passing touchdown.
Yeah.
Now with your running backs, you get a lot of combined lines. You'll get like the combined player rushing and receiving, and those are a lot of fun. Like last week, Ezekiel Elliott's was 107 yards, and I saw that, and I'm like, timeout. It was like week 15 last year, I think, that he like ran all over the Rams, and that was a line that hit. I think he had like 130 something yards last week. So those combined yards you can get with the receivers, and those are a lot of fun to look at. Perfect example, Dalvin Cook. His rushing and receiving prop total this week is 95.5. So it's basically, if you think that Dalvin all-purpose is going to go over 100 this week, that's a great bet to take. So that's kind of an example of one of those combined lines that I really like to take a look at. And, of course, I like to take a look at what they think is going to go on in this game. And, again, it's all about, the sharp money and the action. This game's got a line of 48.5 points, with the Colts. It's a 2.5 point line on some books, 3 point line on other books. So that's a shootout. The game is going to be close the whole time. Great thing about Dalvin, doesn't really come off the field that much, and he's involved in the passing game. So I see a line like that, 95.5, and I'm like, it just feels like something that has a really, really good shot at hitting, because again, that's combined, that's rushing and receiving. So that's one of the combo, I guess, props that I'm looking at this week.
We got him at 118 total rushing receiving.
You take all this information, you take our projections, you take the fact that the book has him at 95.5, you look at the projected 49.5 point total, all this stuff, when it comes together, that's going to help you with your roster decisions in season long. It's going to help you in DFS. It's going to give you a sense of what you can sort of expect. And, of course, it's football, so there's no guarantees, but it helps you make an informed decision in fantasy. And if you're like me and you like to bet, it helps you make the informed decision betting also. So I don't know if you saw my face light up when you said his projection that we have. I'm like, oh, there you go. Keep the book. Let's do it. I think you should make that bet this weekend, Emil. We'll get you on there.
Yeah, I've got to start betting here. That sounds like a good one to start with.
It's fun, and
here in Albuquerque, I may have to drive down to a casino or something. I'm not even sure if I can do it online.
Might have to, but I bet you can find a mobile app. It's also, I will say, prop betting is also a great way to kind of hedge in fantasy. I don't know if you're in like a super competitive home family league like I am, where people don't, if you lose, you got to hear about it for the next 6 days. So what I like to do is I like to look at the players who I'm playing against in my family league, and look at their props. So like I'm going against a guy who has Alvin Kamara this week. So I'm going to look at Kamara's props. And if I like him, I'm going to throw some money on him, because if he beats me this week and he starts talking, I'm just going to screenshot my Kamara prop and say, hey, I know you beat me in fantasy this week, but your buddy won me actually money. Your player won me actual money, so, shut your mouth or whatever it is. It's like I'm half joking, but it's a really great way to hedge too. If you're playing a lot of DFS and you have your core guys and you're mass entering, and you couldn't for whatever reason fit in another high priced back or receiver that you really are, throw some money on a bet on him, because maybe you don't win money in DFS, but you'll win some money on the sports book for as a way to hedge. But it's definitely most fun to place prop bets on your opponent's studs. That way, if you lose, you can kind of throw it right back in their face.
I like that. That's hilarious. Great idea.
And it helps mitigate your fantasy loss if you come up short. And flip side of that, Emil, if I beat him this week and one of his studs also wins me money, now he's got to hear it from me twice for the it's true. It's just, it's just another way to have skin in the game.
That's funny. That is hilarious. I love that.
I mean, at the end of the day, we do it for fun, don't we?
Oh yeah,
There's
absolutely.
a couple Patriots props that I'm kind of drooling over here, and the first one is a James White receiving touchdown at plus 400. I mean, so like to kind of explain that, let's say you want to burn, let's say you want to burn $10, right? You turn that $10 into $40 if James White scores a touchdown, receiving touchdown. Let's say you bet $100. Now you won $400 on a James White receiving touchdown. That's what James White does. He catches the ball and he's used, especially down in scoring situations. We saw Cam run it in twice this week. You've got to think Seattle saw that too, and you got to think Seattle's gonna be like, not on us, not this week. You're not running it in twice on us. So logic tells me they bring the house when they're on the goal line to stop Cam. That opens up an opportunity for James White to get that little dig and dunk pass right into the end zone. And that's a long shot. I call that a scratch off anytime you see a big line like that. And my whole opinion is, if I could go across the street to the liquor store and buy a $10 scratch off, I don't like those odds nearly as much as I like $10 or $20 or whatever you're going to do on James White to score a touchdown. It's a calculated scratch off.
I like your theory there because Cam is pretty sore. I mean, he hadn't played in a while. He's been injured. He did a lot last week. And it does make sense that perhaps he doesn't take as many goal line carries this week, to preserve himself. And White would make sense.
And really, the defense, they're going to plan for. I mean, even though Cam didn't play a lot of football last year, I mean, even I know he's the goal line back on whatever team he plays for, right? I mean, there's no big football than ball on the one for Cam Newton to kind of dive over or just truck himself in there. And so again, I think Seattle also in Seattle. I know that there's no crowd noise, but they still have probably the most truest home field advantage of any team. I think they'll sell out to stop Cam, and it's just going to open up other scoring opportunities. Now, if you think Cam punches one in again this week, because that's sort of what he does, that's plus 270. So again, it's a nice little scratch off. I mean, really, you want to get crazy, bet it both. And if Cam gets a rushing touchdown and James White gets a receiving touchdown, then you just had a pretty good day, and you can't be mad at that.
That's interesting. I like that.
Do we have Cam for any rushing touchdowns in the projections this week?
Let's go take a look.
Let's see. Cam Newton. Yeah. I mean, more than 0. We'll take it.
It only is estimating at 0.2, but
that's more than 0.
Considering last week, he's a tough one to predict, obviously, because he's had the injuries, etc. But I like it. I like that bet. That sounds like a good way to go.
And that's all you can do, really. Is again with these props. It's so much. You take all the research, the data, game situations, the player himself, and you just look for something that sort of makes sense to you. I can't stress enough that football is the highest variance sport when it comes to betting. And again, if anybody's telling you they're a betting expert, then I would say, okay, show me the picture of you, from your private island, because if you're an expert, you're filthy rich and you're not sharing secrets with anybody. I'm an enthusiast who's just sharing my process. And maybe at some point I will be doing this from a private island, but I'm not banking on that. The other side of the ball in this game I find to be super interesting, and this is one of those things where when you pour over the props, it's almost like they start to tell you a little bit of a story, and some stories don't make sense, and this one certainly doesn't make sense to me. Russell Wilson, he's minus 115, which is basically even money with a little bit of juice to throw for over 1.5 touchdowns. So the book projects him to throw for 2 touchdowns, and we have him throwing for, let's see,
1.7.
Same, right? Because it's not like a fraction of a touchdown. So we think he's going to throw for 2 touchdowns too, right? So here's where it gets interesting. DK Metcalf to score a touchdown is plus 200. That's an underdog. It's not a big underdog, but it's still he's not expected to score technically. Tyler Lockett plus 150. Greg Olson, plus 300. Chris Carson, plus 700. So we're expecting Russell Wilson to throw for 2 touchdowns, but there isn't a single Seahawks receiver that's a favorite to score this weekend. So who the hell is catching the ball, right? Like who's, who do they expect to catch the ball? To me, this looks like an opportunity to say, all right, I can either throw all my money on one of these guys, or I can throw a little bit of money on all of these Seahawks receivers, because we know, or we have projections and data that tells us he's going to throw for 2 touchdowns, and every single one of these guys is a positive payout. If DK was minus 200, you'd have to bet 200 to win 100. Him being plus 200, it's the opposite way. So you see something like that, and you kind of put it all together, and you're like, wait, well, that doesn't really make sense. So why not have a little fun and throw it on all of them?
Interesting.
Yeah. And again, like the big thing, it's looking at projections, our projections, seeing what makes sense to you, looking at the sports books, depending upon what state you're in. And if you live in a state like where I live in Jersey, we have a ton of sports books. So you can do what we call a line shop. Let's say I'm really interested in the Russell Wilson over 1.5 touchdowns. I can check all the different books and see who's got the best payout and place my bet there. You're not confined to just taking action on one book. And the other thing is, that you really have to take into effect, and I really think this applies correlates very highly to DFS too, is the sharp money. The sharp money, again, is what the professional sports bettors are throwing their usually large sums of money at. If they're throwing large sums of money, like let's look at the overs real quick for this week. Like the highest point total this week is 53.5, right? That's the Falcons-Cowboys game, of course. Of course it's the Cowboys. Always. All right, 98% of the money is coming in on the over. All right, so everybody and their mother is running to the book, and they're betting the over, which opened at 50 and then moved to 53.5. Yeah. That's moving in the wrong direction. You kind of want it to move the other way to get yourself a better bet, right? But again, here's where it kind of gets a little tricky. The sharp money, the pros, they're now throwing money on the under because they saw that line go a little higher because everyone got so excited because, oh my God, it's going to be a high-scoring game. Let me go bet. And then the pros are like, time out. Now the line got too out of control, and they're betting the under. Either way, that line is set at 50, moved to 53.5. There's going to be a lot of scoring in this game. So in DFS, in your season-long leagues, you're going to want to have these guys in. You're going to want to, obviously in your core cash lineups, Zeke is someone you're going to be looking at. You might be looking at Todd Gurley. In terms of receivers, Calvin Ridley is coming off of this huge performance that is no fluke. That trend dates back to last season. Matt Ryan, we have him this week as the highest, on our projections, the highest throwing, or the second highest, third highest, whatever, throwing quarterback with Dak up top. So you're going to, you can project that these Cowboys and Falcons are going to be high-owned in daily this week. And in your season-long leagues, if you're one of these psychos who rosters 2 quarterbacks in a 1-quarterback league, and you have one Matt Ryan and someone else, you're probably going to want to lean Dak, Matt Ryan. So it all ties in together. And really, I think the movement and popularity of fantasy sports is driving a lot of this prop betting. And just regular sports betting. I wish I could get my hands on data on the percentage of people who bet on sports who are also fantasy football fanatics, because it's we just can't get enough. So why not play daily, play redraft, and bet?
That makes sense. I wouldn't be surprised there's data out there we can find that probably correlates pretty high. No doubt about that.
I would think so. Yeah.
So is there a bet you're going to make with Dallas or Seattle?
So here's the thing. I don't bet my team. My grandmother always told me, she said, don't bet your team. But she never said don't bet your players. So I'm probably going to be taking I'm probably going to take a look at Zeke's all-purpose again. I'd actually like to see what that number is right now, because that's just it's one of those that they're not giving them. Okay. Zeke's all-purpose is at 120.5 this week, so they've adjusted. Last week they had it at 107. They got hammered, I'm sure, on the books, so now they've adjusted. But look at Todd Gurley, 73.5. That's a line that's a little more enticing, and again, that's rushing and receiving. I'm taking the Gurley line over the Zeke line for sure.
Now, what was the Gurley line? I didn't hear it.
73.5 rushing and receiving.
What do we have him at 73?
Is that just rushing, or is that including receiving?
Let's see. Rushing and receiving.
Total. Oh man, that's the type of stuff. You can't just look at the book. You've got to look at your projections too, to kind of give yourself a sense of this. And we had talked a little bit about this, I think, Emil, before we started. We have both of the quarterbacks in this game. Let me just go back there real quick. We have both quarterbacks in that highest scoring projected on the slate. We got Dak at 272. We got Matt Ryan at 251, right? The book has Matt Ryan at 310.5 yards and Dak at 299.5. So, if we think our projections are a little bit low, we're going to want to hit the over on the book. However, if we think the book is a little out of control and we trust our projections slightly more, now that's an opportunity to go ahead and bet the under.
Yeah, that's great. And again, projections are projections. And Atlanta, week 1, horrible defense, having to catch up, very similar to last year. They're going to have games where they overcompensate and they go crazy. And week 1 was a perfect example of that for Atlanta.
Oh yeah. It's fun to watch. I've got a lot of exposure to Hayden Hurst, so I'd like to see what he does. In fact, now that we're talking about him, let's take a quick look at. Okay. So again, I had said earlier about kind of using as a way to hedge, right? Is maybe if you're low on a guy or high on a guy, you go the other way. So I've got Hayden Hurst in 4-1 redraft league. His line on here, 39.5 yards. If I think that Hayden Hurst is going to have a big week this week, I can double down and I can throw some money on him on the book here too. Something that's glaring and popping out to me in this game is Russell Gage, 45.5. It's like the book still doesn't believe in him. And he's going to have his opportunities too. It's a long shot, but he'll have his opportunities too. And that's pretty much where I'm landing right now for this week. Of course, it's only Saturday morning. We've got 24 plus hours till football, so there'll certainly be more I'm looking at.
So when you're going your draft, your bets, do you wait to the last hour or so? Are you looking for changes in percentages?
I mean, my favorite times. Here's the thing: the props, they're stingy with when they come out. You can start betting the over/under and the spread as early as Tuesday. So I try to bet those early in the week before the line moves. But I'm always tracking line movement because that's also going to have an impact on the player props. Player props start coming out slowly. It depends on the book, but they start coming out Friday. Sometimes you get a few on Thursday. Like William Hill is a really great example. On my book, in Jersey, William Hill, on Thursday they've got props out for 3 games. By Friday they've got props out for 6 or 7 games. By today they've got them out for everything. So you can't really, and they have to do that because of practice reports and things like that, But something I was tracking yesterday was Jack Doyle. As soon as he was declared out, I ran over and I was like, okay, what's T.Y. Hilton's line? Because can I get the prop bet in before the book sort of compensates for the Jack Doyle injury? That's just another sort of aspect of prop betting and another strategy to look at is, as you get the alert to your phone that so-and-so's out or so-and-so's been downgraded to doubtful, people like me, I run to the book and I say, okay, what's the other guys on his team? What's the line on everybody else on the team? And did the injury affect that line yet? So, sometimes it's a little bit of a rat race to the book to get there.
Into next week with, I forget how to pronounce his name, the tight end for Cincinnati who went out, and he's probably out for a while. That Drew Sample.
Oh, God, he started getting so much action, Drew Sample. But I was going to say, I don't blame you for mispronouncing that guy's name because both Troy and Joe Buck during that game pronounced his name like 5 different ways. So I have absolutely no idea how to say it.
Yeah, I apologize. I know it. I'm just a little tired. But Drew Sample next week, we'll see how the book adjusts because the prediction was about 1 catch. We had him 1 catch for whatever it was, not very many yards. And I think he got like 9 targets and 7 catches. And if this rookie Burrows is going to be throwing the ball a little more than you would think, this Drew Sample next week could be a nice play because he definitely was looking for him. Now, 61 throws. Oh, yeah. What's this?
I got it on the Post-it. Drew Sample. Look for that line next week.
The clock till you bought Post-it is already started for week 3.
I'm old school. I still use stickies.
That's the stuff you're looking for, right? You're looking for changes that occur that the books haven't noticed yet that you can take advantage of.
And especially early on the season, maybe that they're not buying into yet. Maybe they don't believe it yet. But look, his line is going to – he might not have even had a prop line last week. That's how insignificant he might have been, right? Mm-hmm. So he might have gone from not even having a prop on some books to like definitely going to have a prop next week. And what is that prop going to be? And that's such an interesting one to bring up, Emil, because it's like Burrow has chemistry and connection with every single receiver on that team except for A.J. Green. And it's
he targeted him 13 times.
It just wasn't happening. And week 1 it wasn't happening. I saw something. I wish I knew the actual statistic, but it was like Burrow at one point was like 18 for 26 or something, and like over 2 games, and like 2 of them were AJ Green, and everybody else was like catching 6 balls, 8 balls, 7 balls, and it's just not happening with AJ Green. So we're going to look at Drew Sample next week, but I'm going to add to my Post-it, look at A.J. Green too, because now, after 2 duds in a row, I'm expecting his line to drop next week, significantly. And it's a sucker bet, because I'm going to want to bet it, because I'm like, the volume is still there, the targets are still there, follow the process, it's going to happen. But when is it going to happen? Is it going to happen next week? Is it going to happen after they trade him to the Jets or some other terrible team? When's it going to happen?
Well, first off, let's look back a little bit. He missed a whole year with an high ankle sprain or whatever it was. I still am confused how you could miss the whole year. So I was thinking something's wrong there. Maybe he's still a little bit, hasn't gotten back into the flow. He wasn't really way open when he was being targeted. So he was guarded closely, and he didn't catch a lot of those. There was a couple of them where he didn't quite have his hands ready, and the ball came, and he wasn't quite ready for it. So he could be rusty on top of that. He's going to get the targets, I think. He's going to get a lot of targets. I don't see why they would go away from him, unless they've just decided he can't play anymore, and I don't think that's the case. That rookie Higgins, T. Higgins, actually, he got a few targets. He looked okay, but he's still a rookie. AJ's the guy until they decide he's not really ready for it. But I think it's a little rust. I think it's a good thing to track that guy like you were talking about. That guy meaning AJ Green, because he's been out for a while and he could get better, or he could not get better. We're going to find out. But Joe Burrow has shown, despite being a rookie, he threw 61 times in that game and did not throw an interception. That's a good data point.
And he was throwing it, you take the data point of the 61, it wasn't just 61. I mean, of those 61, watching the game, I want to say 8 to 10 of them were like he was getting killed. Like he was not afraid to stand there and throw the ball and then get just like pile drived into the ground. And you want to see that, especially from a rookie, a kid who's not afraid to get hit, because my God, they were bringing it to him, and he just stoically, nope, going to make my throw and then die, and and it was working. But I mean, with AJ, the targets that I look at and I see that are going to have me keep kind of coming back are those. And I mean, when he's taking shots in the end zone, it's at AJ Green. The problem is a couple of them are about 5 feet ahead of him. But those are such valuable targets, those end zone targets. And you bring up such a good point with AJ coming off the injury. I mean, any of these players coming off an injury, you're going to want to look at their line. I mean, Miles Sanders is a good example. He didn't play last week. The Twitter doctors say that his 100% health is like wink, wink, 100%. His line is 70.5. If you think that he comes out and they feed him the ball and he is going to make up for last week where, Boston Scott was like cheap DFS chalk last week, and he was a total bust. I mean, he just wasn't good. So, you wonder if the Eagles are like, well, the backup kind of stunk last week. This kid's healthy. How often are we going to see him run the ball this week? And that's a line you might want to exploit if you believe that, no, he is definitely going over for 70.5. But again, it's almost like his injury is priced into that line. So that's totally something you have to look at with these props too, is how is an injury or how is last week's performance affecting this week's line?
Interesting. Well, he's a very risky one, obviously, because do you trust whether is he really back? We've dealt with this for decades. When they come back and this guy missed a trip, didn't play, and then he says he's 100%. 100%? Haven't we heard players say that they're never 100%?
I mean, it's a contact sport.
Pardon?
Yeah, it's a contact sport, so.
Yeah, it sure is. Well, this has been great. I can't wait I've already got my little notes from all of what you said. Maybe I'll find a sports book here before tomorrow morning and see if I can throw through bets in. Of course, I'll be betting $1 or $2 if I can. I'm just kidding. I don't know how low you can go.
But if you bet $1 on, Chris Carson to catch a touchdown, you just won $70. So it's not so bad.
That's a heck of a ratio there. Yeah. That's fantastic. Anything else you'd like to bring up before we leave everybody?
Nope. I mean, that's all I have for this week. This was awesome. As you can see by the big smile on my face, I love talking about betting. So, thank you. Looking forward to it again.
And it finally took America some umpteen decades to make gambling legal. Of course, we're still kind of resolving where you can bet at, etc., and people trying to get control of it in their states. So anyway, that'll be fun.
It's been fun.
Well, thank you. Prop till you drop, Jen. It's been a blast. And we'll look forward to next Saturday at 10 o'clock Eastern time.
Yes, and good luck, everybody. I hope you beat the book. That's the goal.
Beat the book.